Imagine this. The sacred books we revere today, believed to be sent by God to prophets, might not actually reflect their teachings. What if these texts were rewritten, altered, and shaped by powerful people long after the prophets were gone? It's a question that shakes the foundations of faith. Welcome to a deep dive into history and religion. Welcome to reality. Before we begin, let's make one thing clear. This video is not about promoting or denying any belief system. It's an analytical exploration based on historical studies, archaeological evidence, and scholarly discussions. Our goal is to encourage critical thinking, not to invalidate anyone's faith or beliefs. We invite you to share your perspective and explain why you believe in these teachings in the comments. Knowledge grows when shared, and your input can enrich this discussion. Millions of believers assume that a physical book descended from the heavens into the hands of prophets. But many historians and scholars suggest otherwise. For example, Dr. John Wansbrough, an Islamic scholar, argued that the Quran as we know it was compiled and standardized decades after Prophet Muhammad's death. Similarly, the Torah attributed to Moses was organized centuries later. According to Professor Israel Finkelstein, archaeological findings suggest that much of the Torah's historical narrative is likely mythologized. However, it's important to note that other scholars, such as William Dever, argue that while the Torah may contain mythic elements, it also reflects cultural memory and oral traditions that hold historical value. The debate highlights the complexities of textual origins. The Bible's formation followed a similar path. Historians like Bart Ehrman have extensively discussed how Roman councils like Nicaea selected certain texts while discarding others. On the other hand, scholars like Craig Evans emphasize the early circulation of consistent core teachings within Christian communities, suggesting a mix of preservation and adaptation. Out of 124,000 prophets mentioned in Abrahamic traditions, why do we primarily focus on just three central texts, the Torah, Bible, and Quran? This narrowing of focus raises questions about how certain books became dominant while others were sidelined or even forgotten. According to scholars like Dr. Richard Carrier, cultural and political forces played a significant role in prioritizing certain texts over others. The Torah, for instance, emerged not only as a spiritual guide, but also as a tool for unifying the ancient Israelites under a shared identity, especially during periods of exile and conflict. The Bible's New Testament was consolidated under Roman rule, with councils like Nicaea formalizing which texts aligned with their broader political objectives. Similarly, the Quran was codified during the Caliphate era to unify a rapidly expanding Islamic empire. There are countless other writings, such as the Book of Enoch, that provide fascinating insights into religious thought. The Book of Enoch, for example, offers unique accounts of angels, visions, and cosmic mysteries, yet it was excluded from most religious canons. Scholars like George Nicholsberg suggest this was due to theological differences, while others argue it simply didn't align with the political or cultural narratives of the time. Another question arises: why do the Abrahamic traditions predominantly highlight prophets from the Middle East? While these prophets undeniably shaped global religious traditions, it's worth considering the vastness of human history. Could there have been other prophets in other regions, whose stories were never documented or whose teachings were lost to time? Some scholars, like Karen Armstrong, propose that oral traditions and local spiritual practices likely played similar roles in other parts of the world. But without written texts, their impact was ephemeral. By focusing on these three texts, are we overlooking valuable perspectives? This narrow lens excludes potentially rich sources of wisdom from prophets whose stories were deemed less important, often for political or geographic reasons. The Abrahamic traditions themselves acknowledge hundreds of thousands of prophets, yet the narrative we inherit is filtered and incomplete. the larger question. So, why these texts and why these prophets? Were they chosen because of divine intent or because they were convenient for the rulers and institutions that preserved them? This question is at the heart of understanding the complex interplay between faith, history, and power. Prophets like Noah, Abraham, and even Jesus left no physical books. Why? According to Karen Armstrong, an authority on religious history, the oral traditions of ancient societies prioritized adaptability over rigid documentation. Written texts, while sacred, became vulnerable to reinterpretation and corruption. For example, the historical Moses remains elusive. Dr. Finkelstein and Neil Silberman, in their book The Bible Unearthed, argue that Moses' story lacks archaeological evidence. Similarly, historians question whether Abraham existed as described, with texts likely reflecting political agendas rather than divine instruction. That said, scholars like Kenneth Kitchen argue that Moses and Abraham could represent amalgamations of historical figures and oral histories, adding layers of cultural significance. History is written by the victors. This applies to religion as well. The Kingdom of Judah, according to Finkelstein, rewrote Israelite history and the Torah to legitimize their rule. Likewise, the New Testament was compiled under Roman influence. Scholar Elaine Pagels notes that early Christianity's diverse beliefs were streamlined to serve imperial interests. On the other hand, N.T. Wright, a prominent theologian, suggests that the canonization of the New Testament also involved a sincere effort to preserve apostolic teachings. This dual perspective illustrates how both faith and politics shaped these texts. Even the Quran, revered for its preservation, underwent significant compilation. Historian Fred Donner suggests that early Quranic texts show variations due to oral transmission. However, other scholars, such as Syed Hossein Nazar, emphasize that these variations are minor and do not detract from the Quran's overall consistency. Here's the deeper question. Would an omnipotent creator rely on books, tools so easily corrupted, to guide humanity? Some theologians like Paul Tillich argue that divine truth transcends written words and evolves with humanity. Consider this: laws in the Quran, Torah, and Bible often reflect their era's context. Polygamy, slavery, and violent punishments appear because they were norms of their time. Dr. Reza Aslan emphasizes that these texts' ethical core, justice and compassion, must be understood as evolving principles rather than fixed decrees. In contrast, traditionalist scholars argue that the divine commands within these texts are timeless and must be interpreted as such. The legacy of written religion has led to conflicts, but it's not the texts themselves, it's their interpretation. Linguist Angelica Neuwirth highlights how Quranic verses, written without vowels in early manuscripts, invite multiple readings. Similarly, the Bible's dozens of versions show how translations shape meaning. These complexities underline the importance of understanding historical context. Misinterpretations, often driven by cultural or political motives, fuel division. Scholars like Karen Armstrong call for critical engagement with texts to rediscover their original intent. Meanwhile, others, such as Alistair McGrath, argue that traditional interpretations also hold cultural and spiritual value that modern critiques should respect. So what should we do? Research. Read the Torah, Bible and Quran. Compare their messages and question the narratives you've been taught. Use modern tools like AI and the internet to uncover hidden truths about history and religion. Religion isn't the problem. The manipulation of religion is. By learning about its history, we can move closer to understanding its original purpose, guiding humanity toward ethical living. We hope this video made you think differently about the sacred texts we often take for granted. Next time we'll explore Tengriism's Zoroastrian beliefs and the true story of Jesus. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. Until then, stay curious, stay bold and never stop questioning. See you on Misty Q Time.